Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Elias. I gave 18 years of my life to a company that discarded me like yesterday's newspaper. It was a Thursday. I remember the way the sunlight filtered through the blinds in my office. Casting lines across the whiteboard where I had written the latest server optimization notes. I thought it would be just another check-in with the new CTO, Graham Thorne. Fresh MBA, sharp suits, glossy presentations. The kind of guy who says, synergy too much and thinks experience can be replaced by enthusiasm in Google searches. Graham sat across from me with Diane from HR, all rehearsed professionalism and thinly veiled condescension. "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary," he said, folding his hands. "It's not personal, Elias. It's just cost-cutting." Not personal? I had built the system they were running on from the ground up. When I joined back in 2005, Azimuth Realty was managing 4 apartment complexes with a fax machine and a prayer. I designed the architecture that grew them into Velver Property Group, a 63-complex behemoth operating in 4 states. Every tenant portal, payment system, emergency response protocol, it was all mine. And now I was too expensive. Diane slid the severance package across the table like it was a mercy. 2 months' pay. 18 years and I was being offered 8 weeks to disappear. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because I was done. There's a difference. I gathered my things, my photos, awards, old notepads filled with sketches of systems that now powered millions of dollars in transactions, and walked out. Nobody said goodbye. When I got home I didn't even speak. Just sat on the porch watching Lake Erie ripple like it had secrets. My wife Maeve brought me a whiskey and didn't ask any questions. She never did when I was this quiet. "What now?" she finally asked. I shrugged. "Something will turn up." I said that out loud, but I wasn't sure if I believed it. Because deep down I wasn't just hurt, I was angry. Not screaming angry. Not punching walls angry. No. I was the quiet kind of angry. The kind that smolders beneath your ribs like coals waiting for the wind. And Graham Thorne had no idea what he'd just done. The first week after I was fired, I didn't touch a keyboard. That might not seem like a big deal to most people, but for someone like me, someone who spent almost 2 decades immersed in code, logic, and clean architecture, it was like cutting off oxygen. I'd sit on the deck, staring at the lake, pretending to be at peace. But inside I felt hollow. Not because I missed the job. Not really. I missed the respect. The sense that I was essential. That my knowledge mattered. And most of all, I missed the illusion that loyalty went both ways. Maeve tried to keep me busy. She's a graphic designer, working freelance from home, and she'd always told me I was overworked, that Velvet didn't deserve me. Still, I caught her stealing worried glances when I let the coffee go cold or didn't answer friends' texts. The second week, the phone started ringing. "Hi Elias, this is Graham. I was hoping we could ask you a few questions about the back-end structure of the payment modules. The junior team is a little confused." Voicemail. "Diane again from HR. Just wondering if you might consider a short-term consulting arrangement. We'd be willing to negotiate the rate." Voicemail. I didn't respond to any of them. They had made a business decision. I was making one too. But my silence wasn't just defiance. It was grief. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop thinking about the meetings I'd once led, the weekends I gave up for system upgrades, the late nights when I stayed behind to ensure no tenant lost their rental payment records. All for what? Cost cutting. By the 3rd week, the calls became more frequent and more frantic. The junior team had hit a wall. I knew they would. You don't build a custom property management system over 18 years without layering in redundancies, custom encryption, and hidden trigger points. Nothing malicious, just good architecture. But architecture without a map is a maze. That's when I realized something crucial. They weren't just flailing, they were drowning. One night, around midnight, I heard a chime. A message from Alan Givens, the database administrator I'd mentored 12 years ago. "Elias. Portal's down. Entire system spitting out 504 errors. Graham's panicking. Payment gateway's been offline for hours. They tried restoring backups. No luck." I warned them. "You okay?" I stared at the screen, numb. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wanted to laugh. But mostly I just felt tired. Because this wasn't satisfying. Not yet. They were starting to realize what they'd lost, but they didn't know the why of it. They still thought I was a plug-and-play part. Replaceable. They didn't understand that I was the architecture. Maeve came out onto the porch, a blanket around her shoulders. She sat beside me without saying anything for a while. "They'll be back," she said eventually. "They already are," I muttered. And I don't want to be their hero. Not anymore." She looked at me. "Then what do you want?" That question sat with me all night. I didn't want revenge in the comic book sense. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted them to understand. To feel what it meant to be careless with people who carry the weight of your foundation. On the fourth day, an email popped up. From Devron Systems, one of Velvra's competitors. A regional firm trying to scale up. "Mr. Kern, I've long admired your work. I heard about your recent departure from Velvra and would love to talk about an opportunity." It was signed by Lawrence Devron, the founder and CTO. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I got up, put on a clean shirt and shaved for the first time in a week. Something was shifting. The fog was beginning to lift. Because now I didn't just have my dignity back. I had options. Lawrence Devron was the opposite of Graham Thorne in every way. Where Graham was smooth and corporate, Lawrence was direct and technical. We met at a quiet coffee shop in downtown Cleveland, neutral ground between the worlds of failed loyalty and fresh possibility. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt and carried a notepad covered in chicken scratch diagrams. "My kind of guy. I've followed your work since Azimuth," he said, sipping black coffee. "Your system at Velvra was revolutionary, modular, scalable, self-healing in some areas. No one in the property management space has done anything close." I blinked. "You reverse-engineered my system?" "Of course. We didn't steal anything, but we learned a lot from what was public-facing. Tenant-side logic, login redundancies, automated triage routing. That kind of innovation speaks volumes." We talked for 2 hours. By the end, he'd offered me a position as chief systems architect. 20% more than what I made at Velvra, full autonomy, and, this time, dedicated budget for documentation and training. "I don't want something slick that breaks when you breathe on it," Lawrence said. "I want something that lasts." That night, I told Maeve everything over dinner. "You're going to take it?" she asked, eyes lighting up. "I think I have to," I said. "But first, there's something I need to understand." Because something didn't sit right. Graham had cut me too cleanly too quickly. I'd been sidelined long before the termination. And Velvra wasn't known for bold moves unless someone higher up signed off. So I reached out to Alan. We met at a quiet deli off the highway. He looked tired. Worn out in a way I hadn't seen before. Velvra was clearly eating him alive. "I'm quitting," he said, barely touching his sandwich. "But I figured you deserved to know what I found before I left." He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. A string of internal emails. Graham to the board. The subject line, Legacy Reduction Plan. "Elias Kern's infrastructure is overly customized and lacks scalability. He's made himself indispensable by design. By transitioning to junior engineers and off-the-shelf SaaS platforms, we estimate savings of $1.3 million annually." I kept reading. Each email more brutal than the last. Graham had been planning my termination for over 6 months, pitching it as a modernization plan. He'd convinced the private equity firm that owned Velvra that gutting the old systems would make the company leaner, more appealing for a sale. And I was just the first domino. "They brought Graham in specifically for this," Alan said. "He's not a CTO. He's a hatchet man. Get rid of expensive experts. Patch things together. Then sell to some sucker before it falls apart." I sat back stunned. So that's what this was about. It wasn't my salary. It wasn't my attitude. It wasn't even about modernization. It was about profits before people. Quick returns over sustainable systems. And I was the casualty. Alan looked up from his laptop. "They're bleeding, Elias. The whole system's a disaster. The payment processor went down again last night. Tenant data is corrupted. Backup servers were misconfigured because no one followed your protocols." I nodded slowly, then leaned forward. "And Westbrook Properties?" "Pissed," he said. "They account for nearly 30% of Velvra's revenue. If they pull out, the company tanks." Maeve was right all along. They weren't just pushing me out. They were burning the foundation and calling it innovation. And now, they were stuck in the ruins. When I got home, I didn't hesitate. I called Lawrence. "I'm in," I said. He laughed, relieved. "Let's build something real, Elias. Something that works." But in the back of my mind, something else stirred. Not revenge. Not yet. But I had a blueprint now. Not just of Velvra's broken systems, but of their betrayal. And every system has a weak point, even the ones built to deceive. My first day at Devron Systems felt like a deep breath after years underwater. No hollow suits. No corporate fluff. Just engineers, whiteboards, and raw ideas. Lawrence gave me full access to their infrastructure, and what I saw was promising, but fragmented. They had heart, but they needed structure. Discipline. Architecture. I could give them that. But I also had another mission running quietly in the background. Not sabotage. Not destruction. Clarity. I wanted Velvra to feel, not just the chaos, but why the chaos was happening. They had treated my warnings like paranoia. Now I would show them line by line the cost of ignoring wisdom. Over the next week, I got updates from Alan, who'd officially resigned from Velvra and was job hunting. He was one of the few who still gave a damn about protecting tenant data. He also still had access to some of the old server logs. And what he showed me? Disaster. They tried to patch the tenant portal with a pre-built module that doesn't respect Velvra's original session structure. Users are being logged out randomly and payment confirmations are failing silently. The backup system was configured without checking version compatibility. One restore attempt corrupted a month's worth of records. They brought in a legacy recovery firm. They're billing $45,000 per week and still can't identify how your logic maps are structured. All while Graham kept calling. Desperately. I never answered. One day a voicemail came from Justin Brandt, the son of the original founder. He still sat on Velvra's board. Elias, I know things didn't end well. But the board's under pressure. Graham says you made yourself irreplaceable by design. I'm starting to think that's not an accusation, it's a compliment. Call me. The irony cut deep. The same man who greenlit my termination was now begging for a lifeline. Maeve watched me listen to the message. You're not really considering helping them, are you? I shook my head. They don't want help. They want rescue. At Devron, I did the opposite of everything Velvra had done. We documented everything. Every decision, every change, every interdependency logged and explained in plain language. We built redundancy into every layer. We trained junior staff instead of treating them like cheap replacements. And the more we built, the more powerful my system became. One day, Lawrence came into my office with a printout. Westbrook Properties just emailed us, he said. They want to meet. Off the record. Why? Because they're thinking of leaving Velvra, he said. And they want to know if we're capable of handling their entire portfolio. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment. The boardrooms. The whiteboards. The late nights. The betrayal. It was all leading here. I'll draw up a proposal, I said. But we'll need to scale. Fast. He nodded. You'll get whatever you need. That night, I sat at my desk with an open notepad and began designing the system that would do more than compete with Velvra. It would replace it. And not through revenge, but through excellence. Because when you build something the right way from the ground up, the cracks in everyone else's shortcuts become too obvious to ignore. Velvra had cut me to save a few dollars. Now they were about to lose millions. And all I had to do was keep building. Westbrook Properties wasn't just any client. They were the crown jewel of Velvra's portfolio, over 10,000 units spanning 6 states. If they jumped ship, it would be like pulling the keystone out of a crumbling arch. So when Lawrence and I walked into that glass-walled boardroom overlooking downtown Cleveland, I understood what was at stake. And so did the man waiting for us. Jeffrey Westbrook. Silver hair, sharp suit, no time for nonsense. I've read the headlines. I've heard the rumors, he said bluntly. But I want facts. Can your system handle our load? Because I'm done being patient with incompetence. I didn't flinch. Yes, I replied. But not overnight. We'll need 12 weeks. Dedicated engineers. Scaled servers. A careful data migration. He raised an eyebrow. Why so cautious? Because Velvra's failures weren't technical, I said. They were philosophical. Systems were built without documentation, then handed off to engineers with no historical context. It's not just broken code, it's broken trust. Lawrence leaned in. We do things differently here. Elias designs systems that last. Westbrook nodded slowly. Then we have a deal. We'll fund the expansion. But we're watching. You've got 12 weeks. Those 12 weeks became the most intense sprint of my life. I hired 5 senior engineers, including 2 ex-Velvra staff who couldn't stomach the mess anymore. Alan came on board full-time. Together we built something new. Not just a replica of Velvra's system, but something better. Modular. Documented. Transparent. We ran daily simulations. Migrated legacy data with precision. Built API layers that could evolve as our clients grew. No shortcuts. Halfway through the timeline, something unexpected happened. Lawrence called me into his office. Justin Brandt was waiting. His face was pale, eyes heavy. "I wanted to talk face to face," he said. "Graham's been removed. The board realizes the mistake now. But the damage? He didn't have to finish. I already knew. Westbrook's departure had spooked investors. Other clients were following. The private equity firm behind Velvra was trying to sell the company, but no one wanted a broken machine held together with duct tape. "No one's buying," Justin continued. "Except one company." I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Lawrence folded his hands. "Us." Silence. "You're considering acquiring Velvra?" I asked. "Only if we can get it for pennies on the dollar," Lawrence replied. "And only if you're willing to lead the integration." I leaned back, stunned. Everything had come full circle. Not only had Velvra fallen apart without me, they were about to be absorbed by the team I now led. What would that mean? I asked. "You'd oversee the migration," Lawrence said. "Decide what to keep, what to scrap, and how to unify both infrastructures under your new system." I looked out the window at the skyline, then back at them. "I'll do it," I said. "But only under one condition." "Name it." "We do it right this time. Full transparency. Full training. And no one, gets discarded just for being expensive." Lawrence nodded. "Agreed." Justin didn't say anything. He just sat there, eyes fixed on me, the man they'd once thrown away like trash. And now, I was about to become the architect of their entire salvation, or their erasure. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what used to be Velvra Property Group. The sleek silver logo was gone, replaced by bold, brushed steel lettering. Devron Integrated Property Management. The acquisition had gone through. For a fraction of its previous valuation. We didn't buy Velvra for its leadership or systems. We bought it for survival. For the client contracts. For the parts worth salvaging. I was now the chief integration officer, overseeing the merger of two completely different operational worlds. It was poetic. I wasn't just rebuilding what they broke. I was owning it. I walked through the corridors I once helped wire for internal network routing. People glanced at me, some with relief, others with shame. A few still looked away. Not everyone had forgotten how I'd been treated. In the server room, I stared through the glass at the blinking machines I'd once hand-configured. Back then, I was building under pressure, overworked, under-resourced. Now, I had a team of engineers, a proper budget, and documentation standards enforced with military precision. In the main conference room, Lawrence introduced me to the remaining Velvra staff. "Some of you know Elias. For nearly 2 decades he kept this company running. Now he's back, to make sure the next version of this company never falls apart again." There was quiet applause. Muted, cautious. But I wasn't here for praise. I was here to fix what arrogance had shattered. After the meeting, I stepped into what used to be Graham Thorne's office. It was empty now. Cleaned out. Word was, after the acquisition announcement, Graham had tried to spin the collapse as an IT sabotage. But there was nothing to investigate. Everything I built had been by the book. Everything they broke through neglect. The twist? Graham didn't even make it to the end of the sale. He was ousted, his golden parachute revoked. And the private equity firm? They barely broke even on the fire sale acquisition. Weeks later, I received a private message on LinkedIn. From Graham Thorne. "I hope you're happy. You let it fall apart. You knew how bad things would get. You didn't warn anyone. That makes you just as responsible." I stared at the message for a long time. Then typed back. "I did warn you, Graham. In meetings. In memos. In proposals you never read. I gave you every chance. You made a decision. You thought I was too expensive. Now you know what cheap costs." I didn't press send. I didn't need to. Instead, I clicked block. Because the real revenge wasn't humiliation. It was replacement. It was watching the system I rebuilt outperform everything he ever pitched. The biggest surprise came a few months later. Lawrence called me into his office, grinning. "The board approved your proposal," he said. "You're launching the technical education division next quarter." I blinked. "Wait, really? You said you didn't want a promotion. You wanted to train the next generation of architects. Well, you got it." I felt something loosen in my chest. Vindication? No. It was purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about legacy. 12 months after the acquisition, we flipped the final switch. Velvra's old systems were officially decommissioned. Every single client, Westbrook included, now operated on the new unified platform built at Devron. Fully documented. Fully supported. Scalable. Secure. Transparent. The platform was no longer mine. It belonged to a team, a culture, a future I helped shape from ashes. That autumn, I stood outside the new training center, the one Lawrence and the board approved as part of my condition to stay. A simple brick building near the lake, with a Devron logo over the entrance and a plaque just inside the front door. Integrity is architecture. Systems fall when shortcuts rise. Inside, the first group of trainees sat in a circle. Young engineers, mid-career professionals, even a few burned-out ex-corporate tech leads looking for purpose. They weren't there to learn how to cut corners or write flashy code. They were there to build things that last. One day, I returned from the training center to find a visitor waiting in the Devron lobby. Justin Brandt. Again. He looked tired. Not broken, but humbled. "My father asked about you," he said as we walked outside. "He's retired in Colorado now, but he still reads the business reports. Said he was glad to hear you were back." "Back?" I smirked. "I didn't come back. I moved forward." Justin nodded. "Fair enough." There was silence between us for a moment. Then he said the words that maybe I'd been waiting for all along. "We didn't value you until it was too late. Graham thought saving money meant cutting roots. Turns out you were the roots." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I wasn't angry anymore. Because when you finally get justice, not through revenge but through rebuilding, it feels different. Quieter. Stronger. Permanent. Months later, I stood again on the deck behind my house, coffee in hand, watching Lake Erie shimmer in the morning light. Maeve stepped outside, slipped her arm around me. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Value," I said. "Not salary. Not titles. Real value. The kind that's invisible, until someone tries to replace it and realizes too late what they've lost. I never needed to destroy Velvra. They did it to themselves. All I had to do was stand still long enough for the truth to surface. And when it did, I was already building something better. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.